Gentlemen, my name is Justin T. Williams. I've been activated from reserve status to preside over this hearing today at the request of our chair, Chair Belzer, and our Vice Chair Powers. Excuse me. If you would, before we get started, let's take a brief moment of silence, please. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Present here in the hearing room, we have Commissioner Hetton Thomas, Commissioner Mike Caston, and joining us virtually, we have Vice Chair Delton Powers and Commissioner Tom Irvin. All right. I'm going to ask the attorney assigned to this case to read the docket for us before we get into any preliminary matters. Attorney Stark.
Thank you, Commissioner Williams. Commissioner Williams and other commissioners, we are here for docket number 2022-159-E, which concerns the joint application of Duke Energy Carolinas LLC and Duke Energy Progress LLC for approval of a Make-Ready credit program. Mr. Commissioner and other commissioners, this proceeding has been scheduled to be heard today, June 20th, 2023 at 10 a.m. in the offices of the Commission. Commissioner, I believe that the docket is ready to be heard.
All right, thank you very much. I'm just going to go through a list of parties I have here. We will take appearances as I call each party's name. I'm going to start with Duke Energy Carolinas LLC and Duke Energy Progress LLC.
Good morning, Chair Williams, Vice Chair Powers, members of the Commission. My name is Katie Brown. I'm in-house counsel for Duke Energy Progress and Duke Energy Carolinas. Appearing here with me this morning are Ashley Cooper and Will Middleton from Baker Donaldson.
Thank you, ma'am. ChargePoint Incorporated.
Yes, sir. Weston Adams with Nelson Mullins Law Firm here in Columbia. I've got my partner, Court Walsh, here with me today, also from Columbia. I also have Matt Deal, who is with ChargePoint, is here attending today.
All right. Thank you, gentlemen. South Carolina Coastal Conservation League and Southern Alliance for Clean Energy.
Good morning, Commissioner Williams. My name is Emma Clancy, and I'm here appearing on behalf of CCL and SACE. And with me today is Kate Mixon.
Thank you, ma'am. South Carolina Department of Consumer Affairs.
Good morning, Commissioners. Roger Hall and Carrie Gruby-Leibarker on behalf of the Commission, on behalf of the Department. Also perhaps joining us later this week will be Phil Porter.
Thank you, sir. Good to see you, Ms. Consumer Advocate. Americans for Affordable Clean Energy.
Thank you, Chairman, Commissioner Williams. Tracy Green, and with me today is Brad Wright. And on the virtually is Jordan Burns, all for AAC. Mr. Burns is not an attorney, he's just a representative.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Office of Regulatory Staff.
Good morning, Commissioner Williams and members of the Commission. My name is Chris Huber, and I'm joined by Chad Torrey, and we are here on behalf of the Office of Regulatory Staff. Thank you.
All right. Before we begin, are there any preliminary matters?
Thank you, Commissioner. Ashley Cooper on behalf of the Duke companies. We do have a preliminary matter, and it's a filing that we submitted late yesterday evening, and it relates to the EVSC docket, which is 2022-158E. So as the Commission's aware, the agreement is to take up the make-ready docket first. That's 2022-159E. At the conclusion of the make-ready docket, proceed to the EVSC docket. The companies have been engaged with the other parties in the docket and recently have made some real progress in terms of addressing and hopefully resolving a number of issues. And that really it's a credit to all parties involved. All parties have spoken up, offered ideas and solutions. Some of these ideas will require some additional technical analysis on the company's part. We think that these things could enhance the program. We appreciate the ideas being brought forward, but we do need to study because some of these are technical matters. So therefore, we have requested that once we finish the MRC docket, go ahead and proceed with MRC, but that we hold the EVSC docket in abeyance to allow the parties additional time to continue their discussions, also allow the company time to work through its technical analysis. We provided a copy of this motion to all parties. ChargePoint came back and said they did not oppose, but they would like to utilize, if the commission were to grant this motion, they'd like to utilize time today for the parties to meet in person. With that caveat, SACE and CCL were in agreement with both. The Americans for Affordable Clean Energy, were agreeable to the motion with ChargePoint's caveat. DCA did not object as well. And my understanding is that the ORS would like to provide its position on the record itself.
Okay. Thank you for that summation. Office of Regulatory Staff.
Thank you, Commissioner Williams. While ORS has opposed the program and still does as it's currently proposed, we do not object to the request to hold the evidentiary hearing in abeyance and to allow time to hopefully work out the remaining issues that are in dispute.
Okay. How much time do you need?
Well, Commissioner, the company is still evaluating that right now, as I said, because there are some technical items that it needs to address. Not to say that, we still need some time to talk with the parties, but we do need some time for technical evaluation. I was wondering if that's something maybe we could come back and update the commission or provide an update to the commission on how things are progressing. So, Commissioner, just to give you a little more clarity, it is not going to be 7 to 10 days. We're talking it will take some time to address these matters.
Okay. Motion granted.
Thank you very much.
Anything else?
Commissioner Williams, ORS has a preliminary matter. It's related to the Make Ready credit, specifically the stipulation the party signed. If it be appropriate to take that up at this time.
Sure. It seemed like Attorney Adams wanted to say something before I granted the motion. Hopefully I didn't move too quickly. Okay, sounds good. Yes, sir. Mr. Huber.
Thank you, Commissioner Williams and members of the commission. With regard to the matter before the commission, initially the Make Ready credit program, this is a program, of course, proposed by Duke Energy Carolinas and Duke Energy Progress, and this program is also referred to as the MRC. And I wanted to make sure it's important to distinguish this program from the EVSE program for which the hearing has been held in abeyance. The MRC program provides a revenue credit to defray a portion of the wiring and other upgrades necessary to support a charger of the customer's choosing. Whereas the EVSE program is essentially a charger rental program that allows a participating customer to select a charger that's owned, installed, and maintained by the companies for a monthly fee. And of course, that evidentiary hearing on the EVSE has been held in abeyance. ORS, the companies, ChargePoint, South Carolina Coastal Conservation League, and Southern Alliance for Clean Energy entered into a stipulation which was filed with the Commission on March 23rd, 2023. The parties to that stipulation agreed to support Commission approval of the MRC program, subject to the terms of the stipulation, including the following modifications and reporting requirements. First, the companies agreed to submit an annual update to the Commission to validate non-standardized load assumptions and compare load estimates with load actuals used to calculate the Make Ready credits. Second, the companies agreed to establish a timeline and process to migrate to South Carolina specific load data and refresh the data annually. Third, the companies agree to track and report all revenue associated with associated MRC program costs in a transparent manner to allow for verification and validation that the MRC program yields quantifiable net customer benefits. Fourth, the companies agree that the EVSC safety standards to qualify for the MRC program were written to refer to common certification methods as provided by nationally recognized testing laboratories. The companies agree that although these minimum standards would apply to the chargers, site hosts under the MRC program would retain decision-making capability over key operational controls and pricing. The companies will simply assist in implementing their desired configuration. And fifth, the companies agree to file an updated tariff incorporating each of these modifications. And I would just ask that the stipulation was filed March 23rd, 2023, be marked and entered to the record as hearing exhibit 1.
The stipulation is entered into the record as marked. Stipulation, you said 1?
Yes.
Well, stipulation here at exhibit 1, I'm sorry.
Thank you, Commissioner Williams.
All right.
And I believe Duke or CCL SACE, there's a separate stipulation they signed that I believe they're going to address. Thank you.
All right. You know, before we go any further, something just came to me that may or may not be of interest or of concern to any party. I drive an EV. I have an EV charger installed at my home. Before I made the purchase and installed the charger, I conducted a significant amount of market research. Does that concern anyone, considering that this case is about EVs and EV chargers?
No concern from the
Duke
department.
companies have no objection and no concerns.
No concern from Charge Point.
No objection from ORS.
Okay, so no objection. Just want to be transparent here. All right.
And excuse me, Commissioner Williams, before Duke addresses the next stipulation, I have a comment on the other stipulation that Mr. Huber just discussed.
Yes, sir.
Just for the record, that stipulation was filed on March 23rd, before the April 21st intervention deadline and before the department intervened on March 28th. We do not have an objection to that stipulation, and also do not intend to cross-examine any witnesses, which was a term in that stipulation.
Thank you, sir. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Commissioner Williams. I just wanted, for the sake of the record, to note, as Mr. Huber said, there was a prior stipulation. There was a prior stipulation between SACE, CCL, and the companies. The stipulations are largely identical. Substantively, they're the same. There were some changes largely to address ORS being a party. This prior stipulation was filed with the Commission on November 17th, 2022, consists of 8 pages, and we would ask that that be admitted into the record as hearing Exhibit 2.
How would you identify that stipulation?
I've just thought about it as the SACE CCL company's stipulation, but
Okay, that's fine. The SACE CCL company stipulation will be marked and entered into the record as hearing exhibit number 2.
thank you very much.
Yes, sir.
And with that, there are no other preliminary matters, at least that the companies have.
Excuse me. All right. So are we ready to proceed with docket number 2022-159-E?
Thank you, Commissioner. We are. And
All right.
The companies at this time would call Corey Gordon and Teresa Reed.
And just as some friendly information, probably more so of a reminder to the witnesses, my understanding is that there's some new on-off buttons down there, so take your time to familiarize yourself with those. Remember to speak into the microphone so the court reporter can hear you, or really so everyone can hear you, even the folks online. And just as a note to the virtual witnesses, the court reporter will not swear you in. I will swear in the virtual witnesses, the live witnesses, the court reporter will swear you all in. All right. If you have any questions or concerns, please feel free to raise your hand, take your time, and proceed with your testimony when your counsel instructs you to do so. After, of course, you're sworn in.
Raise your right hand, please. Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give to be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
I do.
Sorry. Thank you very much. Ms. Reed, why don't we start with you, and then Mr. Gordon will go to you. Ms. Reed, please state your name for the record.
Teresa Reed,
By whom are you employed and what capacity?
Duke Energy, Director of Rates and Regulatory Planning.
Have you prepared or caused to be prepared under your supervision corrected direct testimony of 8 pages that was previously filed with the Commission on May 2nd, 2023 in this docket?
Yes.
Have you any changes or additions to your pre-filed corrected testimony?
No.
If I ask you the same questions here today, would your answers be the same?
Yes.
Have you prepared or caused to be prepared under your supervision 3 exhibits labeled as Read Direct Exhibit 1, Read Direct Exhibit 2, and Read Direct Exhibit 3 that were previously filed with the Commission as attachments to your pre-filed corrected direct testimony in this docket?
Yes.
Do you have any changes or additions to your exhibits?
No.
Commissioner, at this time, I move that the pre-filed corrected direct testimony and exhibits of Ms. Reed be admitted into the record as if given orally from the stand.
Excuse me, the pre-filed corrected direct testimony of Ms. Reed will be entered into the record as if given orally from the stand.
Okay. And Ms. Reed, have you prepared a summary of your corrected direct testimony?
I have.
Okay. Would you please deliver it at this time?
Yes. Good morning, Chair Williams and members of the Commission. In my corrected direct testimony, I explain 1, how the company's Make Ready Credit program credits were calculated, and 2, how the program ensures that non-participating customers will be held harmless. I also support Witness Gordon's explanation of the Make Ready program's rate design and cost recovery. There are 2 options available to residential customers under the Make Ready program: the contractor credit option and the customer credit option. Under both options, customers receive a credit to install Make Ready infrastructure. Under the contractor credit option, customers receive the credit through a reduction in the price charged by contractors approved by the companies to install the infrastructure. Under the customer credit option, customers receive the credit directly by submitting an application to DEC or DEP. In determining how to calculate credit amounts for residential customers, the companies utilize data from their Park and Plug program to establish residential EV charging load shapes and annual energy consumption. If the companies need to perform work in front of the meter to upgrade electrical service to accommodate level 2 charging, the maximum credit is equal to 1 year's worth of estimated revenue. The terms of the Make Ready program for non-residential customers are similar to those for residential customers. However, under the non-residential option, customers receive all revenue credits directly rather than receiving a reduction in the price charged by a contractor. Just like the residential credit, the companies utilize Park and Plug data to determine non-residential EV charging load shapes and estimates of energy consumption by usage segment. If the companies need to perform work in front of the meter to upgrade electrical service to accommodate level 2 charging or DC fast charge, the maximum credit is equal to 1 year's worth or 2 years' worth for multifamily of estimated revenue. The Make Ready credit program creates a net benefit for customers due to the additional load and the spread of fixed costs over more usage. The companies plan to follow normal rate-making processes. Therefore, we are not requesting a deferral or any special mechanism to recover costs. Should costs exceed the credits provided by the companies to participating customers, the participating customers are responsible for those costs, shielding non-participants from the excess costs. Additionally, in the stipulation filed in this docket on March 23, 2023, the companies agreed to reporting and program monitoring to ensure that the revenue credits are appropriate and aligned with customer usage in South Carolina as the program grows. This concludes the summary of my corrected direct testimony.
Thank you, Ms. Reed. Mr. Gordon, please state your name for the record.
My name is Cormac Gordon.
And by whom are you employed in what capacity?
I'm employed by Duke Energy. I'm the Director of Transportation Electrification.
Have you prepared or caused to be prepared under your supervision corrected direct testimony of 21 pages that was previously filed with the Commission on May 2nd, 2023 in this docket?
I have.
Do you have any changes or additions to your pre-file corrected direct testimony?
I do not.
If I asked you the same questions here today, would your answers be the same?
Yes, they would.
Have you prepared or caused to be prepared under your supervision 2 exhibits labeled as Gordon Direct Exhibit 1 and Gordon Direct Exhibit 2 that were previously filed with the Commission as attachments to your pre-file corrected direct testimony in this docket?
I have.
Do you have any changes or additions to your exhibits?
I do not.
Commissioner Williams, at this time, I move that the pre-file corrected direct testimony and exhibits of Mr. Gordon be admitted into the record as if given orally from the stand.
Excuse me, the pre-filed directed testimony of Mr. Gordon will be entered into the record as if given orally from the stand. And I may have made a mistake here, Mr. Cooper. Ms. Reed had exhibits as well, didn't she?
That's
she
correct.
did, right. So we're going to enter Ms. Reed's exhibits. I think she had exhibits 1 through 3. We're going to make that a composite exhibit and enter Ms. Reed's composite exhibit into the record as hearing exhibit number 3. And we're going to enter Mr. Gordon's 2 exhibits as a composite exhibit, and that composite exhibit will be hearing exhibit number 4. All right, thank you.
Mr. Gordon, have you prepared a summary of your corrected direct testimony?
I have.
Would you please deliver it at this time?
Good morning, Chair Williams and members of the Commission. In my corrected direct testimony, I described the company's Make Ready Credit program and the stipulations entered into by the companies related to the program. The Make Ready program is one of 2 programs the companies have proposed that promotes the stated South Carolina public policy goals to accelerate EV adoption. The Make Ready Credit program does this by providing a credit for the installation of the infrastructure needed to bring power to EV charging hardware, thereby simplifying the transition to EVs in South Carolina for both residential and non-residential customers. This credit will reduce the upfront expenses of installing EV charging, which will address a significant barrier to customers entering the EV markets. The companies will provide contractors that customers, at their discretion, can choose to install the infrastructure. However, customers may also source their own installer. In each case, the companies ensure a safe and reliable installation by requiring proof of permit from the local permitting agency. In addition, customers must provide the companies access to the customer's EV-SE installation to verify compliance and ensure safety and reliability. The Make Ready program design provides inherent safeguards that ensure cost effectiveness for both participants and non-participants. Additionally, tracking and reporting requirements will provide the companies and the Commission with valuable data regarding customer usage and adoption rates, among other items. Importantly, these tracking and reporting requirements arise from 2 stipulations executed by the companies in this proceeding, which demonstrate broad support for the Make Ready program. In addition to tracking and reporting data, the companies further agreed to ensure that any infrastructure installed under the program is in compliance with relevant safety standards. Overall, the Make Ready program leverages the company's expertise and wide-ranging stakeholder input to mitigate barriers to customer entry into the EV market, while doing so in a way that will inspire confidence in this relatively new technology by requiring adherence to safety and reliability standards. This concludes the summary of my corrected direct testimony.
Commissioner Williams, at this time, Mr. Gordon and Ms. Reed are available for questioning by the Commission.
All right. And based on the stipulation, I understand there's no cross-examination from the party. Is that correct? All right. So this is going to be a commissioner-led exercise. Fellow commissioners, questions for the witnesses? Commissioner Caston.
Thank you, former Chair Williams. I've got stuff scattered everywhere. I'm sorry. And good morning, and thank y'all for coming.
Good morning.
Mr. Chair,
Commissioner Urban.
did we swear the witnesses?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Reviewing the attachment of witness Sandinato, ORS witness Sandinato, you know, going through all this is, you know, I've tried to understand the chronology, you know, get the chronology of all of this, and, you know, how this ties in with this, how do they work together. And I'd like to tell you I've mastered it, but I have not. So perhaps you guys can help me with that. What I would like to do, if I could, based on my understanding of ORS's, I guess, report, I can't remember the date, maybe sometime in May of this year, that is attached as an exhibit to, I think, direct testimony of ORS witness Sandinato. I'm going to go through what I think is the chronology, and if you could just say yes or no, or fill in the blanks, or help me. Thank you. I call it Pilot 1, which was the plug-in electric charging station pilot program. And again, I know we're talking about make ready here, but you wouldn't have one without the other, would you? You wouldn't have a make ready without an EV program, a plug-in, or?
I want to make sure that I'm understanding your question, Commissioner Caston. When you say Pilot 1, would you mind clarifying what you mean by that for me?
Yes, I would. No, I would not mind. Yes, I will clarify.
Okay.
Commissioner, may I ask you just a quick question?
Yeah.
Just to ensure, I have a copy of what you're reading from, if it would be helpful if the witness, it doesn't have that, if it works for you.
Oh, goodness, yes, please. I want anything that'll help them and help me, so that's fine. It was just a few pages, you know.
Just a few.
I'll give you 30 seconds to scan it. Can you? No, I'm kidding. In any event, what I called Pilot 1, and I don't recall whether it was listed as that in that report, but it was the plug-in electric charging station pilot program, I think from 2011 to 2014. And were either you involved or part of this particular pilot or study at the time?
I was not involved in the pilot from 2011 to 2014, and I appreciate the date reference. That helps me understand. So I was not employed in this role at that time.
And I was not involved either with the pilot.
All right, thank you. And I noticed in that report also it says DEC was not required to file a report of the learnings from the pilot with the Public Service Commission of South Carolina, and that was on page 1 of that exhibit. What I called Pilot 2, which is the ET pilot. Let's see, it says October 10th, 2018, company filed the pilot program based on data accumulated in the 2011 program. And I think that generated docket numbers 2018-321-E, 2018-322-E. On May 20th, 2019, ORS filed comments, recommendations. And on September 9th, 2020, the companies filed stipulation. And I'm quoting from page 3 of that. Upon conclusion of the ET pilot, Duke, the company, to file with the commission within 180 days a report that would include like 6, benefit cost analysis, identification of tangible benefits, cost benefit analysis for each DCFC station, overall cost figures, load profiles, information, charging station cost, insights learned, and I think that was at a minimum. And on October 15th, 2020, orders numbers 2020-645 and 2020-646 approved ET pilot. And if my math is right, that was about 3 weeks after at least 4 of the commissioners on this were sworn in, and I'm sure we had a great grasp of everything at that time. But maybe not as well as now, but. And in, also in this report, as part of this attachment, says as of August 1st, 2022, reports filed by the companies do not yet accurately reflect the ET pilot's potential or establish the ET pilot's efficacy. That's on page 3. And the current proposed docket now, I think, was filed by Duke April 29th, 2022. March 20th, 2023, stipulation filed. And I'm not sure if that was the one that DCA addressed, but I guess, I can get that cleared up. And then today, the hearings start June 20th, scheduled through June 21st, if needed, 2023. Now, I know that was a lot, but is that a correct understanding of the chronology of kind of the make-ready / EV pilots, studies, programs?
Commissioner Caston, it is. If I may, I would note that we've not yet completed the pilots from the case that started in 2018, and so the report associated with them would be forthcoming 6 months from this coming October. And so that would then demonstrate, then or before, perhaps, and I think with respect to some portions of the pilot, we would expect to move more quickly in demonstrating their efficacy. But we've not yet published the report that would or wouldn't. So it's not that the reports as published don't demonstrate that. We're not quite to that point yet.
So if I'm understanding that correctly, the report would be published or disseminated amongst, I guess, the Commission, ORS, and others, between April the 1st to the end of April, or before 2024.
That would be the schedule, yes, sir.
6 months from this October.
That's correct.
Okay. Well, good. That was very helpful. So thinking about that, and all I know about the chronology and the history is what I read. But is it generally not accepted that a pilot program should be executed prior to the consideration of additional measures? Is that a general norm?
I'd say that's one way to think about it. In this case, what I would note is that the programs that we're proposing, well, I would note a few things. The first one is that the program that we're proposing here is very different from the programs that are being operated under the pilot today. Those programs that were approved do two things. One was to deploy sort of foundational fast charging infrastructure for travelers, and we're working to complete that now. The other is a program called the Residential EV Charging Program. We sometimes refer to it as the Off-Peak Credit Program. And that is a program that actually is, part of the technical details that Mr. Cooper, mentioned earlier that we're looking to likely accelerate. And so that's why I mentioned a few moments ago that some of the reporting could come sooner than the April date that we discussed. And so the program that we're talking about here today is one that is enabling for customers as they decide to pursue electrification, or they decide that they want to, whether at their home or business, or that they want to support those that do pursue electrification. Let's say someone that manages an apartment complex or has a retail store, something like that, and they want their customers to be able to charge. And so the thing that I would emphasize then is really the difference in the types of programs. And for that reason, we don't feel that it's premature to propose the Make Ready program now, because it is such a different program. And it is, so much in keeping with where policy, not only in the country, but in the state of South Carolina, are headed. And so we felt it appropriate that we propose it now, as opposed to waiting until the pilots conclude and the report has been filed.
Okay, understand. But the pilot, 2018, which I guess started around 2020, whatever that date was, in essence, would have those results sometime between this October and April 2024, correct?
Correct.
And what's being asked or proposed is to implement a program that's not a pilot program, but that, we need to do this. Again, I guess I kind of go back to like the old programs, the pilot programs that we have no information that I know of, have received no data, information, feedback, like it was the greatest thing we've ever done or the worst thing we've ever done. I don't know. But would not these programs, one way or the other, provide insight into like adoption rates, Make Ready credit program? Let me back up. Personally, in other roles, I've participated or been involved with various and sundry pilot programs. And the pilot program was just that, to let us know, how did it do? Did it meet our expectations or what the expectations were? Did it not meet them? Did it exceed them? And from that, before we went off and spent money doing this or that, it kind of helped direct that. So I guess what I'm asking again, and I appreciate the response you gave, would it just not be prudent to wait until we get the results of this recent pilot study? Because to my knowledge, we never got information relative to the 2011-2014 study, even though I think the report said data was used in it to inform the 2018 pilot. My point being, all this, it may be wonderful, I don't know, but that's the thing. I really don't know. So rather than make a decision on something I don't know, would it not be prudent to wait until we know?
So I would say that I understand, I think the concern or the concept that you're articulating, and why, generally that would sort of stand to reason that you conclude the pilot, you file a report, and you incorporate the learnings. I think, to me, what is unique about the situation that we have is, and not to be repetitive, but just how, I would say how very different what we're proposing is from what's in the pilot. And so the report from the pilot is going to tell us things like what were the utilization rates of fast chargers along the highways at 30 different locations across the state of South Carolina that we've deployed. How much energy was dispensed? Was the usage of those ticking up? And we know today, right, we've not filed the report, but we know today that the utilization of those chargers is in fact going up. We're also getting more and more of them installed over time, and so naturally as more available, utilization goes up. What I would say though is we don't anticipate, because really the market conditions and the conditions of funding perhaps from the federal government and other sources have materialized. And so we don't anticipate at this time that we would take learnings from that program and propose to modify and refile it in some way. Taking the second program that is within the 2018 to, we'll conclude this October, the ET pilot. As I mentioned, it's an off-peak credit program, and we do have, absent a report, we do have learnings about that program already. That program performs very well. Our latest data indicates that nearly 80% of load that was being charged by customers during peak hours has been moved to off-peak hours. And so our goal then with that program is to take it and make it then a permanent program. We've not gotten to that point yet, but that's what we intend to do. Separately, then the program that we're looking at is about enabling customers to deploy their own infrastructure for EV charging. And so I guess what I would say then is what we know about load management from the one program and what we would learn about utilization of chargers sort of out in the wild, I don't know that it would inform how we would support customers going on their own journey. And so that's the program that we've proposed here, and we do believe that it's a prudent time to file it and really to execute it, right, to support customers as they begin to go on their own journey. And so those customers will be making the decision that they seek to electrify, but they see barriers of cost or perhaps understanding and comfort and that sort of thing. So again, not to be, like I said, repetitive, but I would point to this is something different that I don't know will be truly informed by the results of the pilot.
And may I add something to that answer,
Absolutely.
please? So we structured the Make Ready Credit program after our line extension program. So I'm not sure if you're familiar with that, but when we have new load growth, we provide revenue credits to customers because that's additional load, and that helps offset, costs and spreads costs over more kilowatt hours. So the program was taking that concept and applying it to Make Ready for EVs, because if you were a new customer and you were installing, say, DC fast chargers, we would provide this revenue credit anyway for work in front of the meter. So the purpose of the program was to take that concept and extend it to EVs and extend it to folks who already have infrastructure in place so that the program would be fair. So it was really designed not as an extension of the pilots or what we've done in the past, but to enable infrastructure based on a construct we already use for anything else, for building a new home or EVs or anything. So the purpose was really to help with infrastructure for customers who wouldn't have access to those funds versus a totally new customer and leveling that playing field. So that's why we structured the way that we did, and we chose not to offer it as a pilot because this EV thing is like a long-term thing. If we offered it as a pilot, the early adopters would benefit, and those customers who may not adopt early, who may have a longer glide path, wouldn't have access to be able to upgrade their infrastructure. We want level 2 charging. It's much better than just plugging it into the wall in your garage or wherever you would plug that into. So I just wanted to clarify that. It wasn't really an extension of the pilots. We weren't expecting to get the learnings from the pilots to apply this. We were looking at a policy and looking at how we do line extension and what's fair to customers. Why would it be fair for an existing customer not to get a credit, whereas a new customer would? So that's the impetus of the program and why we designed it similar to the construct of our line extension program.
So if I'm understanding you correctly, are you saying that the Make Ready program really has absolutely nothing to do with any of the previous or current pilot programs? Did I misunderstand that?
The design of the program has nothing to do with those previous pilots for Make Ready, which is why we, if I'm answering your question, I'm sorry, but the design of it was simply based on this need to help customers with infrastructure and finding a program and a process that is familiar and approved in all of our jurisdictions that allows for customers to be treated equally, whether you're a new customer or an existing customer. So we didn't design it waiting for the results of the other pilots.
Understand?
Yes.
Okay, let me ask you this then, hypothetical, along the lines of what you just said, hypothetical, because I don't know. It sounds like, based on, Mr. Gordon, that's embarrassing that I've forgotten that quickly, but it sounds, Mr. Gordon, though, based on federal dollars and that, does have some information. I'm not sure what it is, but it sounds like you do have some information. But in a hypothetical situation with no more than I know, but just a hypothetical situation, if, say, there was no, the pilot studies or anything else indicated that, man, EV charging just doesn't make sense, or I don't know that we're going to have any adoption. I don't know. I'm not saying that's the case. Hypothetical. If that were the case, regardless of what the approach or program was on Make Ready, would Make Ready make sense? Would there be any basis for having a Make Ready program?
I don't know if I quite understand your question, but based on policy and growth of EVs, the growth of the market is really the driver for having a Make Ready credit program.
Again, my hypothetical, because I don't know. I mean, I can give you maybe, but hypothetically, because I know nothing about the outcomes of these prior pilots, just hypothetical. If hypothetically, the pilots indicated that, this isn't a good idea. There's going to be very little adoption. It doesn't make good sense, economic sense, or whatever. Hypothetically, If that were the case, hypothetically, would make ready make sense?
So, I know with the DC fast charge pilot, that is studying something very different than what we are doing with Make Ready. But I agree fundamentally, if there was no EV growth, then there wouldn't be a purpose for the Make Ready credit program. However, I do believe in South Carolina, there's policies to support EV growth. There's also EV, we see EVs, more EVs in South Carolina. So on that basis, I believe that the program has value and can really help customers and also help all customers with spreading more costs over more kilowatt hours. But I agree fundamentally, hypothetically, if there was no growth, then there would be no need for the program.
I understand, and I really wasn't trying to trick you. Point being, clearly you feel good and confident with it, as I do believe Mr. Gordon does. I'm simply just telling you what, at least my understanding is that all that may be true. Absolutely may be true. I simply don't know because I have not seen results from anything that I recall. That said, final two questions, and I think, relative to looking at the program, and I think in your direct testimony, Ms. Reed, and I'm looking for it. Let's see, you mentioned on page 3, lines 17 through 18, non-participating customers will be held harmless under the program. Does this mean that there will absolutely be no cost shift for all non-participating customers?
So what this means is that we have designed the program just like line extension, where if the load growth that we anticipate and estimate is accurate from the EVs, that non-participating customers will actually benefit from the additional load growth because fixed costs will be spread over more kilowatt hours. So it is critical that we really look at South Carolina load data if the program is approved, and we reassess the credits based on what we see in South Carolina. So we looked at our jurisdictions as a whole, our park and plug data, but that is the critical piece to this, which is why there is the recommendation for annual reporting and updating. But I am confident, based on our assumptions, that if we get that number correct, then it does provide beneficial load growth and it will not harm non-participating customers.
I understand. But I'm not sure that answered the question. Maybe you did, and I just didn't understand it. You sound very confident in it, and I don't doubt that a bit. It well may be. You may be 99% confident in it. But if the 1% happened, and for whatever reason, would there be a cost shift to the customer, non-participating customer?
If our assumptions are completely wrong, then
Yes.
there isn't a chance that there could be a shift to non-participating customers. However, because we are requesting to implement this and it's not in a rate case, we're not asking for a deferral, the utility bears that risk, and the additional reporting and safeguards will help ensure that we get it right, so that when we do get to a rate proceeding, that doesn't happen. But there's always, I can't guarantee 100%. But I'm fairly confident based on this program's approved in North Carolina. So I've seen a lot of data, and we've been doing this for a year, and it's very encouraging what we see in North Carolina. So that's why I'm a little bit more confident here that I think we can get it right and do the program right and not harm non-participating customers.
Understand. Death and taxes is that 100%, right?
Correct.
Finally, I was thinking about free riders relative to this or any of the programs. Was that looked at? Is that considered? Or, if you didn't have this program, folks are doing it anyway.
Folks are doing it anyway. You're correct. Our analysis did not consider free riders like an energy efficiency type of analysis, but we just looked at load shapes and load growth and the net benefit that the program provides in terms of being able to spread those costs over more kilowatt hours. But you are correct, there will be some free riders. There will be customers that do the work on their own that don't apply for the credit. There are people that have done the work prior to the program that will not benefit from it, but there's always that risk with most programs.
So if the program didn't exist, would the growth be equal to, less than, or greater than?
We think growth would be less than, that the program will drive adoption because it's a cost that customers can defer or not bear the full burden of those costs. It helps EV adoption, or it also helps with level 2, which is a faster level charging than just plugging it in to a normal outlet. So we think it will increase adoption.
Okay. You both have been very gracious, very patient, and I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you.
Fellow commissioners, questions for this panel?
Commissioner Williams.
Yes, sir. Commissioner Thomas, you have the floor, sir.
Thank you. And thank you all this morning. All right, so some of the conversations that you just had with Commissioner Caston over here. All right, so you changed your testimony, you corrected it, and you changed the wording from used to say, so only those customers who choose to participate in this voluntary program are held responsible for the costs of this program. And that was changed, and now you're talking about cost effectiveness. And again, this gets back to the concept of cost shift. I would just like to hear a little bit more about that and why you decided to change your testimony, and more about the cost shift, what the protections are against that, why that doesn't happen.
So I'll start.
Or if it does happen.
I'll start with that because we wanted to be transparent and use the correct words in our testimony, because the program does have a cost and we are providing revenue credits. However, we look at things over a period of time, and we know that we provide revenue credits, let's say, for 3 years, and the measure life of a program is 10. We're looking at the cost benefit over that 10 years to determine whether or not a program is cost effective. So you do have some upfront costs, And those costs over the long term are going to be netted out. There's going to be net benefits, and we've provided that support to the ORS, our load shape and our data, and how we came up with our analysis. So there are costs. We are not right now in a rate case, so the utility bears those costs. This probably will not be a test year. I don't know when our next test year will be. But the additional load helps spread fixed costs over more kilowatt hours. And so the load growth is critical to this, and the acceleration of the EV adoption is critical and helpful. So we changed our testimony to reflect that there are costs, but there are also net benefits over a period of time. It's like any investment that you have. You may pay something now, but hopefully if it's an investment, you do have a net benefit over some period of time.
Okay. So will the revenue credit be considered a cost of service when it is time to file a rate case?
So how we have proposed this from an accounting standpoint is we plan to amortize that credit over the life of the credit. So if it is a 3-year credit, we would spread that over 3 years on our books, taking a third, and a third over the time to match when we're receiving that revenue. So there's a net effect of 0. So therefore, when we get into a rate case, we wouldn't get the benefit of the revenue, but we wouldn't get the benefit of the cost either. That way, it's a way to ensure that another kind of safeguard to ensure that those costs are not shifted, because we're not amortizing it over a long period of time and trying to put a lot in rate base or anything of that nature. We're amortizing it over the life of the credit, which is a little different than we do for line extension. That's spread over a lot longer, but this ensures that really the utility is bearing a lot of the risk in the beginning, because it's not in rate base.
Okay. And you were talking about load growth, and I guess my question there is that eventually load growth is going to require additional generation. Would that be correct?
I'm going to let Corey address that concern.
So, when it comes to the, I guess, bigger topic of grid readiness, and thinking about generation itself, we really rely on our integrated resource planning folks, and their planning for the long term, as I've discussed with them, includes the forecast that we have for EV load growth. And so, that's something that's already, I guess, baked into the plans that the company brings, to the commission. The other thing I would say, and it's been a big topic in these proceedings, is that a big part of what my team sees as its job is to take programs like the residential EV charging program that Commissioner Caston and I spoke a little bit about, and help to proliferate those where it makes sense, and to introduce other programs so that as more customers adopt, we're able to fit that load into times of the day where we don't need additional generation, and we can operate with the grid that we have now. So we really see it as part of our job to defer or avoid system investment where possible.
But if you do end up having to add generation, and then how can you be sure that new load that is generated by EVs, that generation cost is not the capital investment is not going to be passed on to other customers. Can you do that or not?
To the best of my knowledge, the analysis that we would do to ensure cost effectiveness would take into account what portion of EV load could cause new generation. And so this goes back a little bit to what my colleague Ms. Reed said. If there were additional costs, then we wanted to be, transparent that there are costs. But in the long term, we see that customers would benefit in the net.
I think I understand what you're saying, but my concern is that I think the way things are working is the higher income customers are going to be the ones that acquire the EVs, and they're the ones for a while that are going to be driving whatever happens. It's hard for me to understand how this program is going to really get many of the low income customers involved. And as we always hear, the low income customers are the ones that have the hardest time paying their power bills. And it concerns me that this EV growth is going to end up costing them more when they don't benefit from it. And that's just, I wish you could help me a little bit better get past that.
Sure, and I'm glad you brought that up. To be honest, Ms. Reed mentioned a few moments ago a concept called downward rate pressure, and EVs are unique in that they give us that potential. And so what I mean by that is, especially if we're able to manage that load, and we intend to manage that load, electric vehicles, and especially with level 2 charging, and I'm happy to elaborate on that as necessary, but if we can fit a customer's charging into a window, or ask them to avoid times of system congestion, then we take the fixed costs of the system and spread that out across more kilowatt hours. And that then means that each of those kilowatt hours bears incrementally less fixed cost. And so in that way, what we believe is possible, what we think EV adoption by anyone can unlock, is downward rate pressure that can be spread to any customer, whether they adopt an EV or do not, really regardless of the reason that they do or don't adopt.
All right, and so I guess part of what you're kind of alluding to would be something like time of use rates. Is that correct?
Time of use rates are one mechanism that we envision will help customers choose to avoid system peaks when they charge.
Okay, so tell me a little bit about others.
So one is a hopeful expansion of the program that we're operating now in the ET pilot. That program offers customers a credit of a fixed amount on a monthly basis. In exchange for that credit, customers are allowed to charge during system peak hours up to 3 times. Any more than that, and they don't receive their credit. That's the program that I mentioned earlier. We've seen, as of the latest reports, as compared to pre-enrollment, almost 80% shift away from peak time charging. And so we think that's a pretty good result. The other concept that we have begun to explore and really started thinking about solutions for is more of an active charging management program where instead of just asking customers to avoid peaks, they would have specific schedules overnight during which they could charge, or we would cause their charging to occur for them. That's certainly more advanced and involved, but we're encouraged by really the pretty significant result that we've gotten from a very simple program where we just ask customers, please do not charge during these windows. In exchange, they get a little bit of a credit. And we think that's a program that we can expand as we figure out the more complex structures, for future iterations.
Okay. So in terms of time of use rates, have you given any thought as to how those may be designed?
I'll take that question. In our last rate case for DEP, we requested and got approval some critical peak pricing rates. So we have a residential schedule now where we have a on-peak window that's from 6 to 9, either in the winter in the morning or in the summer in the evening. We have discount periods during the day when solar is going strong, and then we have discount periods overnight to help with EV charging. And so we think with our new time of use window structure that this is very beneficial for EV users because they can save money charging at different times that are grid beneficial times. We also introduced other rates, a new hourly pricing rate, which is really interesting. A number of customers are interested in that for EV charging, which then sends a price signal when prices are high and good price signals when prices are low. And that's what we intend to expand upon in DEC when the time comes for that. But we've spent a lot of time reevaluating our time of use rates and setting the time of use periods at the right period so they're not too expansive, but they really hit the times that we know that it's grid beneficial for people to charge. And not only for charging, but for whole home or for whatever use case there is. So that also helps all customers, not just EV customers.
Okay, I guess my concern there is when you are moving to these higher rates for the peak times, and I guess it seems to me like to a large extent the reason that that's happening is because of EVs coming onto the system more so than any other thing that's making that happen. And my concern would be there again is that the low income people haven't changed their behavior at all. But because they haven't changed their behavior and they still use the same amount of energy during the peak periods, then they're going to still pay more. Does that make any sense?
Are you referring to if they're on a time of use rate or not on a time of use rate?
If they're on a time of use rate or whatever rate it is that you're paying higher energy costs during those peak times.
Well, when we were here at the rate case, one of the things that I don't think was up and running in January, but is an excellent tool, I'm not sure if you're aware of it, we have a rate comparison tool on our website where you can log on to your account and you can see whether another rate schedule is beneficial based on your charging or your usage, I shouldn't say charging, but your usage pattern. So it is a great tool for customers to determine whether the rate they're on is the best rate or whether another rate would be better based on their usage history over the past 12 months. And that could help some customers with that process so that if they are not on the best rate, they can move to the best rate. So I do understand your concern though, making sure that our low-income customers are not bearing the cost of any of these new programs. I understand.
And so this program, does it require network chargers?
So the Make Ready credit program does not. It is just about the infrastructure. The customer owns that. We're more concerned about whether the customer has a registered EV to justify the wiring and the work on their side of the meter. So no, it does not require a networked charger, but the purpose of it is to do the infrastructure behind the meter on the customer side of the meter, I should say.
Okay. All right, so let's talk a little bit more about the line extensions and how that's similar or different from the what we're talking about here, the Make Ready. Help me see the similarities and the differences, please.
Yes. So I believe most utilities, and certainly our two utilities in South Carolina, have a line extension policy. And this is called our distribution line extension policy. And the purpose of the policy is to help bring load to an area, and it is to provide revenue credits for that additional load. So if you are a residential customer and you're building a house, the utility will provide 5 years worth of revenue credits to help offset the primary connection to the home. And if you're non-residential, it is a 3-year revenue credit. And that really helps with economic development. A lot of customers can afford to relocate in an area because of some of these credits that we provide. So let's give an example. Let's say you're a non-residential customer and you are going to locate to South Carolina, and let's say for this example, you are going to build, or have 3 or 4 DC fast chargers. Under the line extension policy, we would work with the customer to determine what load that they're bringing, looking at their load factor, the type of equipment that they have. We would be estimating revenue. We have a tool and a process for that. And we would offset that against any cost to bring the primary line to be able to provide that service. So let's say this is very hypothetical. Let's say the cost to bring the line extension is $100,000, but the revenue credit is $50,000, then the customer pays the difference, the $50,000, to bring that line extension to serve that new load. So akin to the line extension policy, the Make Ready program is doing the same thing, but it is for an existing customer. So let's say I'm customer B, and I'm also bringing, 3 or 4 DC fast chargers to my location. Since it's not a new facility, it would not be eligible for those revenue credits. So the purpose of this is to offset that additional cost for those customers. Again, we would do the 3 years revenue credit for those customers for behind the meter work. However, if they have in front of the meter work, it kind of works together. We use a 3-year revenue credit in front of the meter like we would for a line extension policy, and then we give an additional year for behind the meter to help with those wiring costs behind the meter. So it's a program that works similarly to line extension, because in our minds that kind of worked. Why would an existing customer not get a benefit that perhaps a new customer would? It's very similar. So how it's unsimilar is we have, there could be work in front of the meter depending upon the amount of load and congestion or wherever that particular infrastructure is being built. So we've provided an additional incentive if a customer has in front of the meter work. So if we have to do work in front of the meter, we'll give the 3 years under the line extension program, but we would add an additional year for behind the meter work that the customer would need for their wiring. And if it's multifamily, we've suggested 2 additional years of revenue credit for non-residential if they have in front of the meter work. So it's an enhanced benefit for those customers for multifamily to encourage multifamily adoption, which then again supports all types of customers that may be in that multifamily type of unit. So those are the similarities and some of the differences, but the calculations are similar. We're using some of the same tools to determine that. Pre-calculating things so people have some transparency for those numbers based on load factor and what we've seen in our service territories. So that those are kind of the similarities and differences.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. That's all I have at this time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, any other questions? Commissioner Caston.
Follow-up question from, I think, I can't remember who responded to Commissioner Thomas that way. And I remember seeing this, and I think may have been one of your testimonies, I don't recall, that downward rate pressure comment. Because I remember reading that and thinking, I think that means this. I think that means that. And I wasn't sure. Does that mean, and you, I want to make sure I understood what I think you explained to him. It not necessarily that rates will be reduced. Well, let me let you answer that.
So downward rate pressure doesn't necessarily mean that rates will be reduced. I think you could say in the absence of anything else at all changing, that downward rate pressure would cause rates to be reduced. In what it really means is that, not to define a word with itself, but there is pressure that, holds rates down in the face of, whatever other, system growth and that sort of thing might be going on.
So if what you're proposing occurs and EV adoption, I guess, occurs at whatever level the company anticipates it occurring, not outside that band, but within the band of the Duke company's assumptions, that growth of energy demand, how much electricity you sell and how much revenue you collect, will be such that I'm trying to think how to say it, that you won't need to get additional revenue somewhere else. So rather than asking for a rate increase in 2 years at this rate, it might be 3 years or 4 years. Is that a potential analogy?
I'm not sure I'm qualified to speak to it at that level per se. I think the way that, I guess again, what I would go back to is if all other things were held constant, and of course they're not, but if all other things were held constant, and especially as we're able to manage more EV charging, that would create sort of that downward pressure on per kilowatt hour rates.
Per kilowatt hour rate or a unit, I guess your unit cost, you're saying, will go down.
Right.
So what I'm hearing is if EV adoption through these programs occurs within the band of assumptions that Duke Energy, the Duke companies have assumed or anticipate, then there will be revenue that will help provide downward rate pressure, which kind of would just simply hold things in check more so.
Or help things not raise as much. That's one way to look at it as well.
Well, that's kind of the way I've tried to phrase it the first time, but okay. Have you ever seen that occur in your tenure at the company? Do you have any tangible, measurable events where this has occurred?
So, my frame of reference is I've worked for the Progress utility since the beginning of my career, and we did not have a rate case for over 20 or 30 years. And at least in North Carolina, I can speak to North Carolina because I'm more familiar with that length of time between rate cases. So load growth occurred. It was beneficial, and there wasn't a need to go into a rate case. So when you do have beneficial load growth and you have capacity to be able to serve that load, it does keep rates low until there's a need to go into a rate case. So I have seen, I've witnessed, a utility that's gone a couple of decades without needing a rate case. Now that may have been a unique situation because of other circumstances with putting a nuclear plant into service and having a really high rate base, and then over time, that covering a number of things that have occurred over a couple of decades. But I do believe that it's possible to have beneficial load growth, which will help put downward pressure on rates. The whole impetus of the program is to have beneficial growth so that we can provide an incentive to customers where it does provide a net benefit. There are other things that are outside of our control, though. There may be other costs or other things that we're not aware of, or other items outside of EV that we have no control over. But I've personally witnessed, a situation where rate cases were very infrequent.
And that's independent of the riders, fuel adjustments, and all that thing that are outside.
Correct. Just base rate, yeah.
So the tangible, measurable, if I'm understanding you, is that the company hadn't come in for a base rate increase for
a couple of decades, yeah. So, it's probably very rare now. Probably wouldn't happen today, but I've seen that happen in my career, in my tenure.
And what were the events or things similar to this that allowed that to occur?
I would say that I don't know how similar it is, but I would say with respect to that situation that there was capacity and there was load growth. So there was the company was earning the appropriate rate of return and earning the appropriate amount of money based on the load and the growth that was in that particular area, and there wasn't a need for a rate case. It's hard to get a situation that's similar to EVs because this is so new. I don't know of any utility that has gone far enough or matured enough in this journey to say that a program like this or additional EV growth would, materialize into the need not to have rate cases or to defer rate cases because there are so many other things going on at the same time, other things outside of an EV land. But I will say that I've witnessed a situation where there wasn't a need to go into a rate case over a couple of decades, and that's all I can say. I don't know if that helps.
I'll have to ponder that some, I suppose. Finally, as I think about that, and Mr. Gordon, I'm not leaving you out. I don't know if either one of you can answer this, but at least on my brief tenure here, and I think this was related to a lot of the IRPs and such as that, but it seems to be a consistent thing or theme that I have heard that the growth, despite the population projections, increasing population, that the growth, the demand as far as energy has flattened, significantly over the course of time. You're pretty flat. And at least in my industry, some folks would get upset with that. Me, I thought, well, shoot, heck, that just means we don't have to spend money on building stuff. But as I think about that, and what I'm hearing, the questions from Commissioner Thomas and the answers that you guys have provided, is that the downward pressure and the benefit definitely comes to the customer by virtue of having more, obviously, revenue from selling more electricity. The unit cost, I guess, would be better. But from that also, depending on how much it grows, greater demand, you're going to need more infrastructure. Whether that's transmission, transformers, substations, generation, which would be more cost. So, I'm not disputing the downward pressure, rate pressure statement. I guess I still need to ponder it some. I'm still having a tough time getting my head around all this because it's a lot to take in. But I appreciate it. I've kept you sitting there way too long. I apologize for that. Thank you. No more questions.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions for this panel?
Commissioner Williams.
Yes, sir.
Just a couple of more questions, I believe. So one of you mentioned the North Carolina program that's been going on for, about a year or so now, and that this is very, very similar or maybe the same. Is it the same or is it similar? And if it's not exactly the same, what are the differences that you're asking for?
It is the same, and I guess the difference would be the additional stipulations that we've agreed to in terms of some of the items that we've agreed to with the parties. They're a little different than in North Carolina. The reporting requirements are North Carolina specific. So I would say those would be the differences, what's in the stipulation.
So can you tell me a little bit more about those? What's different in the South Carolina versus the North Carolina?
Let me go to the stipulation so I can refresh my memory here. Let's see. So I'll just go through some of the things that are the same and different. So A, Duke agrees to submit an annual report validating the assumptions. In North Carolina, we've agreed to semi-annual, so we're doing 2 reports a year. B, we agree to establish a timeline and process to migrate to South Carolina load-specific data and refresh that annually. We did not have a timeline in North Carolina, but because we are doing the report semi-annually, we anticipate making some changes at this next semi-annual report that's due in August. We agreed to track and report all revenue associated with that. We've agreed to the same thing in North Carolina, and we're reporting that on a semi-annual basis. And the net benefits, so the credits we've actually paid out, how much we paid out, how customer participation, what parts of the programs they participated in, all the statistics. We've agreed to demographic reporting, so income levels for those getting the credits, that's self-reported though, so that we can make sure that all customers have the opportunity to participate in the program. And then another thing in this stipulation is that we agree to the safety standards of, I think in North Carolina we had similar language, but I imagine our language in the tariff would be very specific to what we were asked to do here in South Carolina. We have not developed a compliance tariff, but I would imagine that would be a change in North Carolina. They didn't ask us to do that to this level of specificity. And then the last thing is to update the tariff with these modifications. And of course, we'll do that on compliance if the program is approved. So they're very similar. I would say the big difference is the reporting. North Carolina was also interested in demographic information just to make sure that all customers can participate and are participating in the program.
Okay, let's see. I might have one more. Yeah, I do have one more. So, Ms. Reed, in your testimony, you said that the credit is calculated based on the estimated kilowatt hour usage. My question is if the customer ends up charging somewhere else, like at work or whatever, and so the usage at home is not what was used to calculate the credit, then is that going to be paid by other customers?
No. So our estimate of 225 kilowatt hours per month assumed some level of charging, not at home. And so that estimate was based on data from our other jurisdictions. When we comply with the stipulation agreement, we are going to track actual customers' usage of the program. So in North Carolina, we do load disaggregation for all the customers on the Make Ready program, where we flag their premise as having this infrastructure. And we are using data analytics to see when customers are charging. And we're using that data to determine how much kilowatt hours a customer is using at home. And that will be the how and when we update the data specifically for North Carolina. And if this program is approved in South Carolina, specifically how we would update the data in South Carolina. We would update it based on the average usage in South Carolina for a residential home when we can get that disaggregation data, because that's a part of participating in the program. We track it and we maintain that information at that premise level. so that we can see how that premise performs over time. So it's a very unique and exciting time to be able to do that disaggregation because of AMI data and smart meter data.
Okay. And you just now mentioned other jurisdictions other than North Carolina, I think is what you meant. So do you have similar programs elsewhere?
So in other jurisdictions, we have used park and plug data and data that we have a number of customers in Florida who have EVs. So it was easier to kind of calculate what we saw in Florida in terms of the amount of kilowatt hours per month customers were charging at home. So we do not have this program in Florida, but we are filing for this program in Florida soon, if I'm not mistaken. That's not my jurisdiction, so I'm not fully aware of the timeline on that. But we've looked at charging information from our other programs in other jurisdictions. Like we have an off-peak credit program in Florida, and that is how we can then also use disaggregation to determine kilowatt hours. And that is part of the reason for the stipulation with the RRS is that we realize we need to use South Carolina information. It's just that we didn't have enough to form our assumptions for the program when we first started putting it together.
Okay. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Yep, you're welcome. Thank you.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we've been going for about an hour and 40 minutes or so. Let's take a brief recess, and we will be back at 11:55. We'll be back at 11:55. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Public Service Commission of South Carolina. We're here in docket number 2022-159-E. We're going to take roll before we start back with our proceeding today. Present here in the hearing room, we have Commissioners Thomas, Caston, and Williams. Joining us virtually, we have Commissioners Irvin and Powers, Vice Chair Powers. All right, we're going to start back where we ended before recess, and that is, before recess, that is with Commissioner questions. All right, did you finish, Commissioner Thomas? You had a few questions. Did you finish your questions?
I'm finished. I can't think of anything else right now.
Okay. All right. Well, I have a couple of questions, if that's okay with you two. Thank you for your testimony. You all are experts. You testified at a very high level. And then also you went down deep into the weeds. My questions are they may be similar, but I want to get to the barbershop, hair salon, after Sunday school level basics with some of these issues. The first question is, if I were a customer looking to install a level 2 charger, how much money would I save with this program, a residential customer?
So I can take a crack at that. I think it depends on the level of work you need behind the meter, on your side of the meter. In one of my exhibits to my testimony, I have a schedule. I think it is Read Exhibit 3. Thank you. Which outlines, based on rates that were effective April 1st, 2023, what the maximum credit is. And this is based on the best rate schedule or the lowest cost rate schedule for a Duke Energy Carolinas customer. If you're residential, the maximum credit is $1,236. If you are a Duke Energy Progress customer, the maximum credit is $1,755. But the program is capped to the max that the customer pays. So if you don't need as much work behind the meter or on your side of the meter, then it's less. So it's the maximum of this amount or the actual cost that the customer incurs.
Okay, so how does it work? Let's say, how do you verify the cost? What if I installed the charger myself?
So, well, you would have to be an electrician. So in the tariff, we have a number of provisions and requirements and safeguards. So we require one, documentation of your EV. So you have to have a registered EV. You have to have receipts for the work that you've done. You have to have permits, because to do the type of wiring, you need an electrical permit. And then we would have that information uploaded to a vendor to verify. If you have the necessary documentation, we then write you a check for whatever amount you would be eligible for. Or if you go through the contractor, so you could go through the contractor option, where you get a Duke Energy contractor. The contractor does all of the verification and work for you, and they submit that paperwork on your behalf. And anything that you may owe the contractor above our credit, the customer would pay the contractor, and then we would pay the contractor directly for the portion that they would be eligible for.
Okay, thank you for sharing that. What evidence do you have that level of credit, essentially paying for the installation, incentivizes adoption of EVs?
Do you want to take that one?
So I think the first thing I would point to is the program's been quite successful in North Carolina. So we've had a good amount of adoption. We've had about 2,000 customers, residential customers, that have leveraged the program through our first year. And I would say that, you know, in that first year, we were very cautious about focusing on the operational underpinnings of the program. And so my point in saying that is, even without a lot of education series type marketing, which is what we're starting now to help customers understand benefits of adoption, how the program can help them, or how the program can remove some of the mystique of level 2 charging. Some people are sort of mystified by EVs and EV charging. Even without launching into that until very recently, we had, you know, that amount of uptake with the program. And so that's, I guess, one sort of empirical evidence that I would point to that the program is driving customers to adopt.
So I'm somewhat familiar with North Carolina energy policy, and it seems their policies, North Carolina policies, are different or more expansive than South Carolina energy policies, EV, clean energy, and the like. Do you know whether or not there are any North Carolina policies that are driving EV adoption?
I would think certainly there are some, you know, and if, in my way of thinking about those policies, so, you know, the couple executive orders, for example, 80 and 246 come to mind. You know, looking at what the NCDOT is doing with the Clean Transportation Plan, that's, you know, really, you know, just come around. I think those are policies that will drive a lot of adoption in the coming years. They may have signaled to prospective EV drivers that there will be a good market, but I don't know that actively, I would say that, you know, they're just yet driving significant adoption. I think they certainly will. I think they're good policies, but I think the real uptick in adoption that they strive for, you know, 1.25 million EVs by 2030, with Executive Order 246, I think that's really yet to come.
Is there anything like that in South Carolina?
Well, there's the governor's executive order. It doesn't set a target quite like what we see in North Carolina, but it establishes, you know, an economic development effort around EV adoption and promoting EVs. Establishes the interagency working group, of course, and then also establishes the need for workforce development. Which is, you know, critical, I think, for the future of the EV industry. Additionally, there's Act 46 set up the EV Stakeholder Initiative, and we've seen the report from, you know, from that effort that highlighted, among other things, there are 27 recommendations, but highlighted the need for helping low-income customers, for having incentives and financing mechanisms, and for, you know, leveraging utility assets and expertise.
Do you see a difference in adoption rates between DEP and DEC territories?
I don't have that data committed to memory, so I couldn't say, I'm afraid.
Okay. So we went through the cost savings or benefits for a potential customer who took advantage of the program or takes advantage of the program. And I understand you may not have the exact cost on this, but what is the risk of, I want to say this the right way, what is the risk of the potential cost shift? Like, for the projections that you've laid out and the credits that are offered, how will those be paid for per customer on the residential side?
When you say costs shift, could you maybe explain that a little bit? I want to make sure I answer your question correctly.
How are you going to get your money back?
Do you want me to take that one?
Sure.
I'll take that one, Commissioner Williams. So, we're obviously not asking for a deferral or, and we're not asking for any sort of special treatment here for the program. How it will work is we will provide the credits. We will amortize those credits over the life of that particular revenue credit. So we're basically offsetting the revenue that we would get with the cost. So if it's over 3 years, we would amortize it over 3 years, or if it's 5 years, we would amortize it over 5 years. Let's say within the next 5 years that one of those years is a test year. So if you have a test year and you have costs that are amortized, or you know, you have expenses that are associated with the program in that test year, we would seek to recover those like any other expense that we have. It would be based on the test year approach. But we would also have, over that time, an accumulation of kilowatt hours, more load growth. So as, you know, assuming fixed costs remain the same, which is why managed charging is critical, fixed costs kind of stay kind of flat or the same, or are based on other things besides EVs, and you have this additional kilowatt hours, those costs are kind of spread over all the kilowatt hours, but because there's more of a benefit there than a cost, the net benefit, customers should not see a rate increase associated with this program based on our assumptions. But it is critical, which is one of the good things in the stipulation, is that we reevaluate the assumptions after we have enough data and make them applicable to South Carolina usage. If we do that and we control costs for the program and we do the reporting, I think that's how we ensure that non-participants are not harmed and there's no cost shifting. The only way there would be a cost shifting is if the benefits outweigh what we've assumed the kilowatt hours to be. And so that is a critical piece here, is getting those kilowatt hours correctly, which is why in North Carolina we've agreed to reevaluate and to continue to evaluate and to look at the program, because it is new and novel. But that is the key to all of this, is getting those assumptions correct, and if we're wrong, correcting them quickly so that customers are not harmed.
Thank you very much. Perfect answer to my question. So let's say your assumptions are wrong. And back up a bit. Let's say we approve their program. The commission approves your program. Your assumptions turn out to be wrong. Our approval, there's no expectation that our approval of this program translates into approving costs at a future rate case.
That is correct. And think about it like this. If you do approve it, you approve it now. We're not in a rate case. This isn't a test year. So, you know, by the time a year goes by and we have good assumptions and we can update things, that is the more critical period in my mind. So I see it as very low risk in terms of shifting costs or any. I think we bear more of the risk of getting it wrong in the beginning than I think customers do, because we're not asking for recovery at this point.
I appreciate that acknowledgement. I have no further questions. Any questions from my colleagues? Hearing Commissioner Irvin.
Yes. Thank you. Apologize for calling you about him. I'm in a habit with Chair Belser, and I appreciate being recognized. Let's go back just for a minute. I want to try to simplify things for myself in terms of my understanding of this new program. You talked earlier when you were answering questions earlier this morning that this new program will not increase rates at all for residential customers. Is that correct?
I testified that it puts downward pressure on rates because the kilowatt hour usage is increased. I think that the biggest caveat is that we have to make sure that our assumptions are good. But because we are not in a rate case at the moment and we have not asked for recovery, it will not increase rates. At least there's no way that your rate is going to go up resulting from this program at this time, because we are not asking for recovery. We're not asking for a deferral.
Okay. Could you explain how you'll use the 1-year update in terms of reporting back to the South Carolina Public Service Commission? Are you going to use that information? Assuming we approve the program, you're going to do an annual update and then give us some kind of follow-up report. Is that my understanding?
Yes, pursuant to the terms of the stipulation, we would be required to produce an annual report and update our assumptions annually based on South Carolina data. So what we would do is people participate in the program. We identify their premise with kind of a make-ready flag, and we would be tracking their usage, their AMI usage through disaggregation to make sure that we see that load growth for that customer participating in the program. And we would use that data then to update assumptions. So for example, if 225 kilowatt hours for residential customer is not the right assumption, it's higher or lower, we would then update our assumptions and file that with the commission. And once that is approved, we would then offer a higher or lower credit based on actual usage that we're seeing in the system. And with that analysis, we would also update our cost-benefit analysis. So our modeling takes into account avoided cost and other things, the cost of the program. So we would be looking at the cost of the program, avoided cost, and load shapes from South Carolina customers, and we would update all of our assumptions. And if any of those things are off, if our costs are too high, then we would need to lower our credit. We would have to come in balance so that we provide a net benefit for each, for the program in order to move forward. And the good thing about doing the annual reporting and having that accountability is that, if something is amiss, we can correct that quickly. It's not that we're waiting till a rate case or waiting years down the road to determine that something isn't correct. We have the opportunity to correct the program, to modify the program. But at the end of the day, any program that we recommend, it does need to be cost effective for customers.
Okay, so there are some built-in safeguards in the event we do approve the program. You can make annual adjustments as needed, as you described. Is that my understanding?
That is correct. And there's a number of adjustments, not just kilowatt hours. If we see program costs going to cost us more to administer the program than we've estimated, that goes into cost effectiveness. We can make some tweaks to the program to make it cost effective.
Very good. And so, based on your understanding of the program, and is it true that you helped to design or implement the one in North Carolina?
I did, yes.
Okay, so you're intimately familiar with how that was done, correct?
Very familiar.
Okay. Based on your knowledge and experience of how the North Carolina program has been set up and how it's proposed to work in South Carolina, do you believe that this program is in the public interest for South Carolina ratepayers?
Yes, I do believe it is in the interest of South Carolina ratepayers.
Would you tell us what you're basing that upon. Just give us the reasons why it is in the public interest.
Yes. So one reason is I believe South Carolina policy supports EV adoption. One of the things that is a barrier to adoption is infrastructure upgrades. This program supports infrastructure upgrades. Also, we've designed the program to be cost effective and to provide a net benefit to customers. And I think that is key to approval here, that non-participating customers will not be harmed by the program. So if you don't adopt an EV, then you should not be harmed because other people do. But if costs remain, what we think that they will within the bounds of the program, we handle managed charging appropriately, then it will put downward pressure on rates. And that's why I feel it is in the ratepayer interest to approve this program.
Okay. And I want to go back to your earlier testimony where you said that this new program would help hold down rates. Could you explain just in a little more detail how that would hold down rates for a non-participating residential ratepayer?
Sure. So I always describe things as a denominator in the equation. So I'm in rate design, and I work on rate cases and such. And so you have your cost to serve, and you have a kilowatt hour, and you divide those two numbers, and you have a rate, or you could have demand or some other component that you're pricing as well. So I think of it this way. If your cost of service remains the same, but your denominator, your number of kilowatt hour sales are increasing, your unit cost to provide that energy is lower. So as long as the cost of service remains the same, it doesn't cost more to serve, and we have more kilowatt hours, then that reduces your unit cost. If you have fewer kilowatt hours but the same cost of service, then your unit cost is higher. So this is all about what the unit cost of energy or demand is, assuming that your cost of serve is the same, regardless to EV adoption or not. So by increasing the denominator, it does put downward pressure on rates. And conversely, let's say the cost of service increases not resulting from EVs, and your denominator increases because you have EVs, then that also puts that downward pressure on that unit cost, versus your costs go up and your kilowatt hours are lower, then that means a rate increase. So that's what we mean by downward pressure on rates. It's really that denominator and how you're spreading or calculating that unit cost.
Thanks for that explanation. The other thing I wanted to ask you about, does the company have any plans to put this new program into rate base going forward?
So if and when there is a test year and there are costs as well as kilowatt hours associated with the program, they will be captured in that normal process that we have, where we're looking at expenses and costs and things of that nature. However, we will also have the sales associated with the program. So at that point, whatever is unamortized would be picked up in the cost to serve. However, again, the analysis is about the net benefit of these additional kilowatt hour sales.
Okay, but the commission would have to later approve that it go into rate base. So that would ultimately be up to the commission at that time.
That is absolutely correct, and yet another safeguard.
So if we chose not to approve it to go into rate base, and that if that was our decision, it wouldn't happen. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And in the meantime, the company bears all the cost and expense of the program.
That's correct, because we have not requested a deferral or any sort of accounting treatment.
Okay, so if we approve the case in this docket, we approve this new program, there are certain safeguards that are built in to ensure that this may never go into rate base and affect all ratepayers. Is that correct?
There are a number of safeguards, including the reporting, the ability to update the tariff and the processes, and then ultimately we would have to get approval to put it in rates.
From the commission?
From the commission, yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So one thing I wanted to clear up too is that I've been reading about how some jurisdictions are actually using the adoption of EVs to kind of build a way to supplement the grid. And what I'm specifically referring to is back when the winter storms hit Texas. It's my understanding that the folks that did have previously installed EV would actually be able to use their power to power their homes. Is that something that could happen in the Carolinas if we approve this?
So, Commissioner Irvin, I'll take that question. Ultimately, yes, that is something that could be possible in the Carolinas. This program, what you're describing is called bidirectional charging or vehicle to grid. And so this program does not specifically target a vehicle to grid outcome, but it doesn't prohibit it either. And so it is possible that a customer wishing to leverage the program could do so for their own vehicle to grid setup. I think the other thing that I would mention is the companies do have an approved pilot in North Carolina to work with Ford Motor Company and potentially others to test this technology. And so at this point in time, we see that it's prudent to do that on a limited basis and really learn more about the technology itself. But certainly that is something that also could lead to more proliferation of the, home resilience, scenario that you're talking about there. So I would say, generally, yes, this program could support that eventual outcome.
And eventually, all these, assuming that EV adoption increases in South Carolina, as we expect that it will, as the pricing of EV vehicles comes down and people decide to take advantage of tax credits that are available through the IRA, the federal legislation, assuming that adoption does take hold, I suppose that same kind of usage could actually serve as a backup grid if you had a weather outage like we had back on Christmas Eve in South Carolina. We just, Duke Energy Carolinas couldn't find any power from any other source. If we had in place, several 100,000 EV adopters, could their power have been directed toward the grid to actually restore power sooner? Is that what's happening in some jurisdictions?
I'm not aware of a vehicle to grid project on a scale like that. No, sir.
Okay. I was just curious because I've read somewhere where that might be the next thing, but don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves. I appreciate your testimony, and those are all the questions I have, Mr. Chair.
All right. Ms. Reed, I just want to make sure I ask this question one more time because I think I understand the answer, but just in case I don't, we have a figure, ballpark figure of the savings to a residential customer who takes advantage of this program, but you all don't have, I guess, accounting for the cost of this program at this point.
So we do, and in our original application, we provided those figures in exhibit. We estimated the cost of the program in Exhibit 3, and this was to the application of the program that we filed in 2022. And so we took the credit amounts that we've estimated to give to customers and these costs, and we put them through our model to determine cost effectiveness. So we have determined, that with the program costs and with the credits, that with the increased kilowatt hour sales that we've estimated, that the programs are cost effective based on our analysis and assumptions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Thank you for, yes ma'am, thank you for sharing that. How much does the program cost?
So and this is with everything. So we estimated what the potential revenue credits would be for residential, non-residential, and then we estimated what the per transaction cost would be for both utilities combined. We estimated over 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I think it's 5 years, $10 million between the two utilities. Most of that split going to DEC at $8.7 million and DEP $1.1 million, or $1.2 million roughly.
And that's over 5 years. That's all in costs?
That's all in costs, yes.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Yes, you're welcome. Thank you.
Okay. If any redirect, Attorney Cooper?
Thank you very much. I'm going to ask just one question. Since I came to the podium to get ready to say this ends our case, I may as well just ask one quick question on redirect, and then I'll stop. Mr. Gordon, this is for you. Ms. Reed was asked the question of, is this in the public interest? And she answered that question. I'd like to ask you, similarly, you testified that you are familiar with South Carolina public policy. Is it your testimony that this program is consistent with South Carolina public policy?
It is.
Okay, thank you very much. Ms. Reed, Mr. Gordon, we have nothing further for you at this time. Commissioner, the companies rest their case at this time.
All right. I think now is a good time for lunchtime. We're in recess until 1:45.